Welcome to episode 17 of the Everyday Sens podcast. I'm Jack Richardson, joined by Brennan Parks. And Brennan, we are going to talk about a new arena today. We're going to get into some free agents potentially in the event that Alex DeBrincat leaves. But even in the event that he stays, we could still dive into some numbers. We got some good projections on a lot of players who are on the Sens as RFAs and even UFAs in the whole market. So we'll get into all that on this Monday, June 19th. Brennan, how are you doing today?
Doing good. Yeah, it's exciting. I mean, I know I've been tweeting out a lot of lineup projections there over the last few days, and people, it's always met with conversation, which is good. But I think, yeah, even if the Brinket stays, like the Sens still have holes to fill, right? And I'm actually writing a piece on that right now too. Like they're gonna have to evaluate the market either way, so I don't think it's just a one or the other. But yeah, we can start off with the arena stuff. I know Ian Mendez just released an article, so we'll get into that. And then I know you're pretty engaged on that stuff, so hit me up here.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm super engaged. I live somewhat close to the downtown core, much closer than I do to Canada. I'll say that for free. And I don't know. I've talked to people for sure who like the arena there because they live close to it and they don't really want to see it change. But at the end of the day, this is it's not just about the Sens. It's about the city, right? And I think if anyone's kind of aware of what Mark Sutcliffe, the I guess kind of not new anymore, but he's been mayor for less than a year in Ottawa, and a lot of his he's pushing for a better downtown core, right? And they're stepping up their game in the Byward Market and all this stuff. And the Sens, I think he recognizes that the Sens are a part of that, right? A new arena is a good long term plan to just kind of revitalize or make the downtown area of Ottawa more appealing. So he spoke with the Athletic today or this weekend, and Ian Mendez put it out with some good quotes actually from Mark Sutcliffe. But he mentions LeBreton Flats being a good option, but not the be all and end all. And when you hear that headline, to me, it kind of immediately you're like, oh, is he kind of pouring cold water on it? Like, is it not going to work out? Um, but he more just dives into kind of what I was mentioning. Like, there's more options. There's more options in the downtown area. Again, I'm going to go back to kind of the news and like they're disposing of a bunch of government buildings because they're all working from home now most of the time, so they don't need to have all these office buildings where there's no one in there. So it's a lot of real estate right in the middle of downtown Ottawa on Elgin Street, on Bank Street, and these would be decent sizes of land where you could put an arena. I don't know if anyone's ever been to, or if you've actually been to like a game in Toronto, Montreal. I guess
I
Vancouver's
haven't
also
actually.
okay. So I went to a Leafs Sens game this year for the first time, and like it's a world of a difference. It's right downtown, like literally plopped in the middle of King Street, I think it's called, or whatever, Bay and King. And it's awesome. You just take the subway and like you're right there. It's you don't get that huge stadium feel when you're walking up to it, kind of like you do at the CTC, but because you can't really see it, it's just this big door and you're in. But it's way better, I would say, just in terms of the restaurants around. I know I tweeted out a while ago that the Sens closest restaurant outside of the arena is a 27-minute walk, and that's the Bell Sensplex. The next closest in the league is a 12-minute walk. Like they're just far and away like the worst location ever, for because it just hasn't been developed. Anyway, I'll read this quote here quickly from Sutcliffe that was in the Athletic. He says, "LeBreton Flats would be great. Don't get me wrong, but it is not right downtown. It's still a bit of a trip, and I know some people will get a little bit not frustrated, but technically it's not really in downtown. It's just west of it, just west of Parliament. It's still a bit of a trip. No one's going to take a walk on Elgin Street after being in a restaurant, especially in January, to LeBreton Flats. And it's going to take a while to develop the area around LeBreton to the point where it's a fully developed area, whereas downtown is already developed." I have to agree. Like he's not wrong, which is why it's exciting. And just quickly, it's important that the mayor and the new owner, both kind of new in their positions, are so eager to kind of get to know each other. Michael Andlauer is going to sit down with Sutcliffe and Daniel Alfredson actually, I guess this week or Tuesday, tomorrow at some point. So it's important. It's good. It's nice to see that the mayor is also aware of how important this would be just for the city, because there's a lot of non-hockey fans that live in Ottawa, right? And I think having the mayor who is responsible for all of those people and all of their best interests be so open and so eager to kind of get something done with the Sens and work on that. That just it's a good positive vibe and a good change from the past with Jim Watson and Eugene Melnick's relationship.
Yeah, and we talked about that last time about how it's just so critical to build these, like rebuild these bridges that were burned under Melnick between not only like the Sens and players and everything else and teams around the league, but the city of Ottawa. Like the local investors had pulled out of a lot of stuff with the Sens because of their burned bridges with Melnick. So it's nice to see Andlauer kind of prioritizing that. And I know he's been like consulted by Cyril Leader or and a few other people who are related to the Sens in the past. So that's obviously helping. The one thing I pulled from this article about the arena though is that patience. And I know it's right in the title, but I went to the bottom and there's another quote from Sutcliffe that says, "We've got a once in a 50-year shot at getting this right. And hopefully this will be the arena for the next half century. So let's get it right and let's get in the ideal spot. It's a thought worth considering. We should evaluate all of our options before we make a big decision." So that to me, it's just like, I know people don't want to keep waiting because originally the plan for LeBreton was, it would already be built, or the new arena would like already be built way back when they first talked about it. Now we're looking at a timeline of 2028 to 2030, which is not, in my mind, it's not terrible. I still think that's a fine timeline. I'm not super rushed like a lot of people are, but I know that obviously it's going to be a huge thing for the city of Ottawa. So Ian too, he also said like Sutcliffe doesn't want to have a building completed in 2028 only to have everyone feeling regret 5 years later, which is a good point. It's like we can rush it, but if there was a better location or a better spot for it, we're going to regret it. So to me, yeah, I completely agree with you and with Ian that I think they should evaluate every option. I know these government buildings, they have like 6 million square feet or something of space. So there's tons of room to build this facility. And I think that is definitely an option as well. But Andlauer, from everything we've read, doesn't seem to be in a huge rush with the arena thing. Like, it's not like his first priority is just getting this real estate opportunity out there and making money and stuff. It's more like, we're going to build this team and then we're going to also work on this simultaneously, but it's not going to be the priority necessarily. So like I said, I think that's why I like Andlauer so much, is he's so focused on the Sens hockey team. But yeah, either way, I think we're going to get a new arena at some point. I'm very confident that is going to happen. I don't think they're going to be at the CTC 10, 15 years from now. I think that is something that's going to happen. So it's exciting. I mean, that's something we've been waiting for, and it's going to be great for not only the team, but for the city as well.
Yeah, seeing the downtown area, and especially in the summertime, like it's the Sens Mile is on Elgin Street. It would just make sense for the arena to be somewhat close to it, right? And anyone obviously who's been to a Red Blacks game or a 67s game, like Lansdowne is awesome, and it's become an attraction, like not just for sports. Like you can go down there. It's the best movie theater in Ottawa. They've got really nice restaurants down there, right? And they've got it's cool how they do it. Like, I don't know if you've been down there, but they've got parking underground, which is super cool. Like
Yeah.
it's all like laid out and it's like kind of like a huge sidewalk, right? Another thing I wanted to kind of mention is yeah, I don't know if government buildings is enough space for an entire arena. Like you'd obviously have to move things around, and I'm not the business or the architect guy who's gonna walk around and be like, oh yeah, let's do this, but another thing that they can kind of look to do is new arenas around North America, and the Kraken Arena, Climate Pledge Arena did this. I went to Austin in February, Austin, Texas, and they call it the Moody Center, I think. Brand new facility. Their basketball teams play there. What they do, kind of like what Seattle did, is it's almost like a one-story building from the ground, and then you get in, and it's like it's almost like it's like if you walk into the Canadian Tire Center and you walked in on the 300 level and then you just walk downstairs to the ice, and like
So it's
it
like
was
built
really cool
underground. That's kind of cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's essentially like in a basement. It kind of throws you off a little
Mm.
bit, but I mean, and I know the Moody Center was like it's built on like this hill, so from one angle it's one story, but then you can get down to the 100s from the other side of the building. Just like, I don't know, I'm sure the Sens, like whoever's going to build this arena is going to do that, even if it was at LeBreton. I think that design that the Sens put out a year ago, when they got the memorandum, or I think I don't know the legal term for what they have an agreement with the NCC, but when they put out that graphic with the LeBreton rink, it actually looked a lot like the Moody Center. So I think they're kind of having that idea in mind. So doing something like that in like the downtown area where you don't have a ton of space to work with is important. So I think an architect can get pretty creative with that. I know they've talked about doing a not like a 20,000 seat venue, like maybe 15, 16,000. Just it makes numbers look good. It's obviously not as many tickets to sell, but you're probably going to get a sellout every night at that kind of venue and capacity. Like there's a lot of options like that are exciting to me. And look, I mean, we're both like in our early 20s here. Like this is the perfect time, I guess, for us personally for a new arena to be built in downtown Ottawa. Like it's right in the prime of your life where you're just starting to um, I guess get a sense of the city if you live here or if not, and it's exciting in that regard for me.
It is for sure, yeah, and I think like the amenities around it is what's really exciting because right now you go to a Sens game and then you leave and that's all. I mean, like when I drive into a Sens game, I'm not walking somewhere right after. Like you said, I'm just driving home. I'm sitting in the parking lot waiting to go home. With this, right, you can go downtown, and I know I haven't been to a downtown game for any team, but like I was in Winnipeg and I drove by their arena, which is also downtown, I believe, and it was just like this it did not look like an arena. Like I couldn't even tell it was an arena. It just looked like a door, like a wall of entry, and it's this massive arena. So it is cool the architecture kind of standpoint on that. And yeah, Ottawa again. I don't particularly know where it's gonna fit in Ottawa. If it's not LeBron, I know Bayview Yards was talked about. If it's right downtown with the government buildings, like that would be really interesting to see what they do. But it would be the best spot for it because you're able to walk, a couple minutes and you're at all these different things, right? Like you've got so many things to do. Which would draw this massive crowd of people, obviously, because I think for a lot of people, like watching the Sens is one aspect of it. Like if you're a diehard fan, you want to go to as many games as possible to watch the actual Sens play. I think for a lot of the more casual fans, it's kind of just a nice outing, or like even for a family, it's just a nice outing to be able to take your kids and watch a hockey game, even if you don't know all the players or you don't really care who wins. It's just kind of a cool thing to do. And then with this, you're able to actually go and do other things after. It's not just going to see the Sens, right? Which right now, where it is in Canada, it's kind of inconvenient for anybody who just wants to go watch a hockey game and then go out and do other things after because it just doesn't really make sense. So I think that's kind of an underrated aspect to it. Is it's going to bring a lot more of the casual fans in who just want to enjoy hockey, right? And that's going to boost the numbers. I think Winnipeg too does do the lesser seats thing, if I'm not mistaken, and they always get sellouts because of that.
Yeah, yeah, I think they might be at 15,000,
Yeah,
maybe even
they're
less than
smaller.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but I
It-
mean,
but
if
but
it's
it's
working,
one of the best atmospheres in the NHL too. Like it's if anyone's worried about not having a crazy atmosphere on any given night, like a couple thousand people isn't going to make that bad of a difference. Like it's still going to be rocking all the time. The other important thing is like it's not. I mean, I don't think this is political, but the impact that will have on local businesses if there's an arena right downtown, all the restaurants around there. I know that Bank Street there are, like because of COVID and because of the less foot traffic because of the pandemic, with no government workers being down there all the time, like businesses are having to close, which is awful. But there's no attraction down there for people to go. Like there's no reason to go down there right now. So and again, Sutcliffe knows this. It's all kind of tying together. So we'll leave the arena stuff because that'll obviously. I mean, we could be talking about this for years, right? But like you mentioned, 2028 will be the target, I guess. 2029 that season maybe, and that's not bad. That's 5 years away, which is pretty. Which sounds crazy. Like I think if you say 2028, people are like, "What the hell? That's a decade away." But no, no, folks, it's
it's not that
2023.
far.
It really isn't. If want to know something a little bit humbling though, in 2017 when they had the original plans for LeBreton, it was going to be ready now. Like it would be
That's what I
ready
mean. I
this
know. That's why
season.
we're all kind of like impatient now. Is that was the
Yeah,
expectation, right? But
yeah. So a little bit delayed, but hey, it's nothing but good news that the mayor and the new owner are going to get off on the right foot here, and that the mayor is saying things like this is a once in a half century kind of move. So we got to get this right, and it's people who care about the city. They all have the best interest of the people in the city. So that's exciting. All right, let's move into actual hockey stuff. Let's actually talk about the Ottawa Senators. We're going to talk about the free agent market. Now, last episode and I guess it came out 2 days ago, on Saturday, we spoke a lot about Alex DeBrincat and kind of convinced ourselves, or I convinced myself during the episode anyway, to just pay the guy because from my point of view, I saw it as just this is a negotiation through the media kind of thing. Like Bruce's stuff seems like it's coming right from the Sens, and then Steve Warren's got stuff coming from DeBrincat. So anyway, all that aside, I said let's pay him. Let's dive into if they do and if they don't. We've got projections for every single player in the league. We have so we can start with let's start maybe with the Sens projections if you're good doing that, and then we can kind of just you're the numbers guy, so I'll let you take it over here.
Yeah, so Daily Faceoff put out the top 50 free agents, and obviously Frank Saravalli does a lot of work there. And they had a projection for each contract, and at the time I thought they actually were the ones that came up with that, but there's actually something called AFP Analytics. So credit to them, and they're kind of a consulting group who provides this to teams too, I guess, where they project every contract in the league, and it's ridiculous. It's just a Google Docs spreadsheet that I found 10 minutes before we started doing this and pulled it up, and they've got every player in the league with projections. And of course, they won't be 100% accurate. Like, it's going to vary. There are some other factors, like free agency generally leads to overpaying players, and they're kind of more basing it on their actual production and the things that they're worth on the ice. So there will be a bit of variance. For the Sens, though, so they've got Alex DeBrincat, first off, whether it's with Ottawa or not, at 8 years times $8.9 million, which is very bold. And they didn't just like overpay everybody either. Like there were some pretty low values as well. So I think it's pretty balanced. But DeBrincat being at 8.9 is interesting because most people are very opposed to him getting $9 million from what we've seen. So with that even further kind of makes me open to the idea of doing it, just because I think that this is something where they're actually using analytics to factor in the valuations. They've got Eric Brandstrom at 2 times $2.1 million. So I like that deal. I think Brandstrom will probably get around 2 times 2. Like that would be my kind of offer to him. Or if you could get less for sure, but I think that's what he's kind of worth. And then they've got Shane Pinto at 2 times $1.9 million, which is pretty low, actually. I'd be surprised if Pinto only takes less than $2 million, but it would be a nice deal for Ottawa for sure. And then I think they had Bernard Docker too at like under 900,000, which is obvious. That's just what's going to happen. But yeah, for Ottawa, I think those deals would all work. I think Brandstrom and Pinto being worth $4 million in total is kind of what you're aiming for if you're the Sens. But yeah, what do you think on those 3 or 4? And do you think that they are worth it?
Initial thoughts for me is that it'd be crazy if Pinto gets less than Brandstrom. I do think they'll both be in that area of just under or just over 2 million. It'd be crazy though. It'd be crazy if Eric Brandstrom gets more than Shane Pinto, because I don't think he should. I don't think he should. But they're both they're both third line, third pair young guys, probably going to sign a bigger contract later in their careers. Probably, we've talked about it. They're the two candidates to price themselves out of Ottawa for sure. So that's the immediate thing that jumps out to me. DeBrincat, I don't know. I mean, that's like I don't know how they're projecting that. Also, why 8.9? Like, I don't understand. It's like Josh Norris, right? When he signed his, I think he's 7.975 or something like that. Like he just couldn't get the 8x8, I guess. Like it's just and you shrug it off. It's like, oh, it's just a decimal point. Like this is thousands and thousands of dollars that we're talking about here. Like these are it's a lot of money. So anyway, yeah, like I see that, and with those numbers, they can keep all 3, right? I would imagine that is what, just under, quick math here for me, is like just under 13, 14, 15 million, which is what the cap space the Sens have. So, I would imagine that projection for DeBrincat is factoring in that he's an RFA with the team he's with, I'm assuming, because you look at some of these UFAs, which we will. Let's dive into that now. Like in the event they have to trade DeBrincat and it's a scramble and they can only get futures for him, this free agent market's not great, eh? Like I know we've talked about it a little bit, but their projections are interesting. Here's a guy who the Sens have been linked to in the past because he was an Ottawa Senator, Connor Brown. He's 30 years old. They're projecting a 4-year deal at 3.2. That just, I don't know if I would do that. This is the one I would stay away from. There's 2 that I want to mention here. So, oh, sorry, I lost it. Tyler Bertuzzi and Michael Bunting. Okay, I would take Bertuzzi over Bunting without the price. Like that wouldn't matter to me. Like it's just if it's pick one or the other, I'm picking Bertuzzi. So Bertuzzi, they've got him projected at 6 years at 5.26. Not nothing, but I think you could swallow that if you don't have a DeBrincat on your roster. Michael Bunting is projected to get. Where is he? Sorry, I'm all over the place here.
Bunting, I think,
I'm not a
is
numbers guy, just for
five
anyone
times
watching.
five
This
point
is
two
there we
five.
go. Okay, Michael Bunting is 5 years at the exact same price, 5.2. Um, that's too much to me. Like that seems like uh that's a little bit too much for a guy like Michael Bunting. So anyway, my point is this free agent market is not good enough to bank on. And also you're in Ottawa and you have to bank on players not wanting to come here, pay them a bit more to come here. Like there's a lot of moving parts um for the free agent market. So it's just I love the spreadsheet though. I mean, yeah, there you go, perfect. So I don't know, like these guys, like I would like a Connor Brown at 3.3 because we've had him and we know what he's going to bring. Like he'd actually be perfect for what they need. Can play second line, but you kind of need two. You need a Connor Brown and who? Like you
Well,
need to
that's the
replace it
thing.
double.
Like, and that's what we were saying about trading DeBrincat is that you're basically going to sign two players who you hope can supplement what he was doing and providing the Sens, which you're going to end up with like overpaying an Ivan Barbashev and a Connor Brown, which I don't like. I don't like that. And that's actually, I just threw it up by accident a minute ago, but I had this tweet where I put out a lineup and it was basically like sharing, like if the Sens trade DeBrincat, so I had the lineup with DeBrincat in it and then without it, and basically like I signed Ivan Barbashev for 5 million into Brinket's spot, and then Jesper Fost on the third line at 2.5 million. And I said, which would you take? And I mean, I would take the first one all day with the Brinket because Barbashev is a massive downgrade on DeBrincat. I know he was great in the playoffs, and everybody right now has this like this playoff. I don't know what to call it. It's like this. They're very influenced by the playoffs right now because it just happened. It's like recency bias almost. So they saw Barbashev always so physical and good in the playoffs, and of course he is. But at the same time, I think he was like a 40-point scorer this year. So for me, like DeBrincat is a much better player than Barbashev. And if you're paying Barbashev probably 5 million, I would say I think he'd get that plus. And this could be for Bunting or Bertuzzi too. It's like you're paying him more than half of what DeBrincat would have been making anyways, and then you've only got 3 or 4 million to upgrade your bottom six and your goalies, which is really enough to sign a Jesper Fost and have 1 million left over, and then you'd get like maybe a mid first round pick from DeBrincat trade too. But it's like to me that's just not worth it if you can keep him for 9 million. Like why not just pay the 9 million and use your internal options to fill the depth?
Yeah, so this is where I'm gonna take an argument for the depth. Okay, let's say in a perfect world here, um, Tyler Bertuzzi and Connor Brown both come to Ottawa. So you're by these numbers, you'd be paying probably a bit more. Actually, it might add up to exactly what DeBrincat ends up getting. Yeah, just 8.5, 8.6 right there. I think that
And I
more
still
quick
think
math.
Bertuzzi will make more than 6.
I mean, yeah. So obviously it all comes down to numbers, but my point is like those when you look at it, like you're only getting one of those guys and then filling from within. That's a loss. Like you're going to be worse. But if you get Bertuzzi and Connor Brown, all of a sudden I really like the outlook of that top nine still without DeBrincat. But again, I'm on the side of just pay the guy who's like what you're getting. So just pay him. Why spend 9 million on two guys who are gonna give you 50? I don't know. Like that to me is the difficult thing. I really do think though that if they end up trading him, that it's going to be a hockey deal. Like they're going to get a piece back that will contribute right away and significantly. Like Dorian knows this. He can't um like if they got futures, so the draft is what 9 days away now. I think it's the 28th. If they got futures, they'd have to flip those for players before the draft because the futures are going to be for June 28th. So they're not really futures, right? They're right now. But the minute you make those picks, the less value, like the value plummets because the appeal is that the team can pick their own player at that spot, whatever. Yeah, so it's just really interesting looking at the projections, and we know. I mean, we shouldn't say we know, but the league, the big secret is that free agency is the worst place to build your team. Like teams do not do well on July 1st. Like I think it was 2016, Milan Lucic, Louis Eriksson, Kyle Okposo, like all these guys were the hot ticket that day, and they all signed like 6 year deals for 6 and 7 million.
It's a
Uh, and
trap.
and they were all disasters. Andrew Ladd, like all these guys are brutal. had brutal contracts. I guess they're all up now, but like it's just that kind of thing is what you got to stay away from. And the reason this year is so dangerous is because there's no big fish. There's no Claude Giroux. There's no I'm forgetting who else was a free
Well,
agent last summer,
the
but
top scorer this year in this class is Alex Killorn, who is 34, and he scored 64 points in 82 games. That's the highest
honestly,
scorer.
Killorn and a Connor Brown combo, I could be talked into that
But they're
very
old.
much.
Well, Killorn's old.
See, they are old, but it, that's why I'd stay away from like a 6 or 5 year
Yeah.
deal. But like if these guys are, I mean, Killorn, oh man,
It's just it's short term, and then you have to find somebody else in like 2 years, which is like, yeah.
yeah, but you gotta, but then I mean, you also gotta replace Giroux, and I guess that's yeah. I'm again, I'm not advocating for trading DeBrincat. I'm just saying if you can, throw a little bit extra money at Killorn and be like, hey, well, we'll give you some signing bonus money. Just come bring your experience and your size. I know that was kind of you're rolling your eyes at that this morning, but that's actual experience that I would be like, that's a guy I want. He played on the top six in Tampa.
Because he can actually contribute in an offensive
Yeah,
respect. It's not just that you're signing him because he's big. Like,
yeah. However, he's gonna have that Stanley Cup price on him. I would imagine he's gonna get a pretty hefty payday. So anyway, like that's what I mean. I think that's what we mean when we say it's just easier to keep DeBrincat and just pay him because you have to get two players like to replace him, and that's not a question. Because the problem with DeBrincat staying is like, oh, now you got to fill another spot in free agency, like for your third line. But like if you get rid of DeBrincat, now you gotta look for a better player who can play second line at worst, right? Like you need to at least have a second line player in there. So it will be a downgrade, but if the salary ends up swapping like for Killorn and Connor Brown coming in and then DeBrincat going out for whatever it is, I'll be convinced then. I think like that those would be two guys like I'd circle them and be like, look, if those two guys add up to 8 million in salary and it's on shorter term deals, like I'd love that, to be honest. I forgot about Killorn.
well, my only concern then is with injuries still, because if Josh Norris gets hurt and you don't have Alex DeBrincat here, I get very nervous, which is something that feels likely at this point. But either way, like I just want to say, I know I've been really heavy on DeBrincat and keeping him, but if they do trade him, like there is a several scenarios in which Ottawa comes out a winner. Like I don't think it's just an automatic be angry if they trade DeBrincat. I think it's on Pierre Dorion to go out and, like you said, if they sign two players, and whether it's Killorn, whether it's I don't know, like I know it probably wouldn't happen, but if they sign like Vladimir Tarasenko and Jesper Fast or somebody who can kind of actually replace DeBrincat in the sense that they will be a good second line player and not just like a third line player playing on the second line, then I think you're in a better spot. Now that comes back to, could they make another trade? Because if you acquire, like, the timeline here is kind of insane actually, because I know DeBrincat's camp is kind of saying they shouldn't have a timeline, but Dorian is kind of saying, well, we want to get a pick in this draft, or picks to potentially flip, like if we're going to trade him. So really, we have like a 10-day timeline here internally for Ottawa, which is a little crazy because it's not really picking up steam right now. But if DeBrincat was traded, like it's probably going to be in the next 10 days or so. And if not, well, then we're more interesting because it doesn't really make a ton of sense to trade him unless there's a crazy deal there. But my point being, like, if they trade him there, they better be sure they can flip those picks, because if you don't and you're banking on free agency, we just talked about it. Free agency is not a good spot to bank on. That is not really where you want to end up in any case, not even just with DeBrincat. Like if you go into July 1st and you have these massive holes on your roster, it gets pretty nerve-wracking just because, well, now are we going to have to be desperate and overpay for somebody in free agency, or are we going to be able to pull a trade off? Like it's just very uncertain. I think if you trade DeBrincat and then you flip it, I'm still going to say Travis Konechny is my top pick. Like I know Philly's actually shopping him too right now. Briere is shopping him in Philly. So if you like flipped it and got somebody like that who's on a cheaper deal, and then you could still have money to spend in free agency, like that would be pretty nice, right? And in that case, I think Ottawa's the definite winner. But if you trade him, get the 25th overall pick, use the pick to pick some guy who's not going to contribute for 3 years, and then you sign like Connor Brown and then a goalie or something, I'd be pretty disappointed because the roster is just worse. So yeah, for me, like it's definitely there is a scenario and many scenarios in which Ottawa comes out successful, but it's all on Pierre Dorion, and I think his job really banks on it, because if he fails this, if he messes this up, he's probably at the door pretty soon.
I think I called it career defining for Dorion, which sounds crazy because he's made so many trades over his tenure, but it really is, because I think this trade was his home run deal last summer, and it was the summer of Pierre. Like Giroux signing was great after that, but this started it. Like DeBrincat was July 7th, I think he was traded for the draft. And it was like it was shocking. It was absolutely shocking. He just fleeced Chicago at the time. It seemed like an absolute underpay. And then he did it again with Jacob Chikrin. So like I don't doubt Pierre Dorion. I actually have confidence in him to make
So
this
do
deal.
I.
Like I like that it's him because he knows what this team needs going forward. If new ownership was in place a couple months ago and it was, I'm just throwing out a name, but if it was Steve Staios doing this, I would be a little bit more nervous just because like I think there is something to be said for knowing the team and being around, like So anyway, I found Killorn on the spreadsheet. Another guy who's at 5.2. So they're kind of getting lazy here. All the top guys are just making 5.2. It seems like, but I mean, hey, that's the class. So I'd be shocked honestly if anyone gets more than 6. But let's just do it. I did the quick math. Connor Brown and Alex Killorn would add up to about 8.5, just under 8.5, I believe, with all the extra dollars and stuff there. If they got the exact contracts that Daily Faceoff has for them, so 8.5. So if DeBrincat's asking for 9, and you can get these guys for a combined 8.5 on 3 4 year deals. They've got Killorn at a 4 year deal here.
That
Um,
makes me nervous. That makes me nervous.
four years
Yeah.
makes you nervous,
Well, he'd be
really?
38 at the end of his deal. He's probably going to regress. I mean,
Oh, he is
I don't know.
34. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just risky,
That's the
like,
thing.
because
So I
then
think I
Giroux gets
think
older too, right?
okay,
So
but listen, so this is what with Killorn, like if you throw more term at him, I bet you get that cap hit down. That's how it would work, I think. Like,
yeah,
but
probably.
so that's probably why term is the most important for him at this point, I would imagine. Um, yeah, that is a bit of a red flag, but at the same time, now's the time to bite the bullet. Like in 4 or 5 years, when Killorn is probably declining and not playing as well, Brady Kachuk's contract is done, and like Shabbat's done, and Batherson will have a new deal or wherever. Like a lot will change. They'll be at LeBreton. Like there'll be a lot will be different at the end of that 4 year deal. So yeah, you're right. Like the term would scare me, but in the short term, which is what we need, like if you're moving to Brinkett, you're not looking to build for 3 4 years from now. You're looking to compete tomorrow. And a guy like Alex Killorn to me would just be um, pretty ideal for that second, third line. He didn't have a great playoff. He didn't have a good playoff against Toronto. I think he struggled down the stretch. Maybe that'll drive the price down. I don't know. Yeah, so I know we're just spitballing a bunch of players. Like realistically, it's such a free agent frenzy is such an unknown because you don't know who wants to come here and who doesn't and all that. Like all the stuff about the crazy owners out the window, like the team not being fun, like whatever, all that's gone. It's good culture and all that now. But unfortunately, it's still Ottawa, and um, when you're not from here and you don't know it, it's hard to convince someone to come play here with all the other mitigating factors like the state tax, the it's in Canada, it's cold. Like I don't know, there's so many other. So if I'm a free agent, there's so many more appealing places to play hockey than Ottawa. And I'm from here and I love it. But I mean, how could you not? Especially if you're Alex Killorn and you've played your entire career in Tampa Bay, like how would you not want to be looking at like a Dallas or a Vegas or a somewhere warm again, right?
Well, that's why it's so hard to actually be realistic with free agent options, and why I don't think they should um, pull off the desperate play of going into free agency without a replacement for DeBrincat, because um, you're going to be banking on players who might not even agree to come here, and it's just that leads to overpaying. Like that leads to being desperate and throwing way too much money in term at players who don't deserve it. And I mean, even the other names there, and it was an NHL league executive that recently said, I think he told somebody that this was like an effing terrible free agent class. Like it's god awful. And again, that's not to say like Alex Killorn is a bad player, but if you look at the names I put up, like the ones that I saw as fits for Ottawa that could replace DeBrincat were Bertuzzi, Bunting, Barbashev, Tarasenko, Connor Brown, and yeah, Alex Killorn. But it's like, each of those players is going to be overpaid and have too much term. Like I do not like Michael Bunting at 5 years, $5+ million. That is not something that appeals to me, right? Like, and all these players, it's just you get into these bidding wars, and I don't like that. Which is why I think, again, if they trade DeBrincat, they should be looking to flip the assets they get. Like, I just really hope Pierre Dorion does not leave this until draft night, get the picks, make the picks, and then be like, okay, well, we've added a good prospect to our pool, but now we have to go make our lineup better for next year. Because, again, people are really undervaluing trading DeBrincat and what that does to the roster. If you look at, you're making faces over there. You got something shocking. You were gonna have to find out what that is. But if you trade DeBrincat, like the roster gets a lot worse. So again, yeah, you've just got to be able to have a plan in place if you are moving him, because again, you don't have to move him. You can sign him, you can keep him, and the roster can stay just as good and actually better than it was last year because Norris comes back. Whereas if you trade him, I still say like it's going to be hard to make the roster better, other than the core taking another step forward.
Yeah, he doesn't want to. I think everyone started diving into the market when that first report came out that he doesn't want to stay and he doesn't want to extend because he doesn't like it here. Um, that to me, I think anyway, I know some people might still agree. That's out the window to me. I think that's he doesn't want to stay for this price, which is totally within his right. If the Sens are like, hey, you can't make more than Kachuk and Stützle, so here you go, which is again also in the Sens right, and by the way he played last season, completely fair. But if this is just a negotiation going on right now, then there's no reason that the Sens should be like, oh yeah, we don't need you because there's better options, because there isn't
They have
until we
very
see it.
limited options,
They have
actually.
very,
Like,
very limited options. So I was making a face because I was scrolling through it, and we are going to touch on goalies. Let's get into that, and this is perfect. Ilya Samsonov is projected to get a 4-year deal. He's an RFA, 26 years old in Toronto. Obviously, he played last year. He was good. Have you looked at his cap hit
no, I haven't
projected?
seen it.
5 million.
5 million.
$5
Okay,
million
see, I'd
dollars for
have to
Ilya
look more into
Samsonov.
because I know he did have a really good year though. Like,
I'm not paying him five. Like I think
let's see here. I think
someone
he.
makes like five is excessive. I know you went through all the cap hit goalies who have won a cup. The highest was 6, wasn't it? Or Vasilevsky, I guess, at
Vasilevsky,
9.
yeah,
But
he just signed his 9.5. I'll put
but
that
he's
up
he's
actually.
in he's like not fair. I would say I think Holtby was at 6, and that was the biggest one maybe. But like not to say that they can't win with him as at 5, but like that's nuts if he gets 5 million a year. Um, After one good year, I would be anyway. We'll segue that into kind of some goalies that we want the Sens to or the Sens could look at on the free agent market, um, because obviously it's a position they should address if they can, but still not the end of the world if they don't.
Yeah, so I've got the tweet up here. It's just for anybody not on YouTube, it's just like the cap hit of every goalie since 2010 who's won the cup. Just because I think there's this constant variance in opinion of how much should you pay a goalie. Like, should you? Because a lot of people feel that Ottawa needs to acquire a proven star goaltender to be competitive. And usually when fans are in the league, they look at the Sens, they say, "Oh, they're not a playoff team because they have Anton Forsberg and net, and like that's not good enough." But you look at the goalies who have won the cup in the last however many years here, 13 years, and it's like you've got Aiden Hill, Kemper, Vasilevsky twice, Binnington, Holtby, Murray twice, Crawford twice, Quick twice, and Thomas once, Tim Thomas. So those are obviously good goalies, and in their prime, like Jonathan Quick and Corey Crawford were among the league's best. But I think you can still get by without having someone signed to Bobrovsky's contract, right? Like you don't need a $10 million goaltender. You can sign somebody for like okay, in my salary cap projection, I had 5 million allocated to goalies, which is a little low for my liking, admittedly, but I still think you can sign like you could have a tandem of a Forsberg level guy who I feel is at the very least average, and last year he was above average, like 2021, 22. And then you could sign like a Semyon Varlamov, and you could have that tandem. And in a few years from now, obviously they'll be a bit older. You could get a similar level of tandem, like two goalies who are around that average to above average level, and you could sign them for a combined 5 million. And I think that with Ottawa's defense, because I think defense is really the critical aspect to goaltending, and limiting high danger chances and having a good penalty kill. I think if you can kind of combine two guys who are average to above average, you can have like you can win. You don't need to have you don't even need to have an Andre Vasilevsky. Tampa obviously got a star there, and he's really helped them in the playoffs, but you don't need that to win. I think that's kind of proven by these numbers that we're seeing on the screen of the winners over the last several years. So yeah, what do you think? Like, what do you think goaltenders should be paid? Like, how much should Ottawa allocate to goaltending in the future?
Well, it's interesting to look at all this, right? I want to say Kemper. I think that might be his new deal. Like, I don't think he was making that in
I think it was his
Colorado,
first. I thought it was his first year. I'm not sure. I'll have to look.
because I know they traded for him, and then he signed with Washington at that price. But I don't know. Anyway, it doesn't matter because what this list shows is in the past, you needed the number one guy. You needed a number one guy to kind of take you. And I think right when Matt Murray came in the 2016 season there, I want to say that that was when it kind of shifted, like goaltending philosophy shifted around the NHL, where if you don't have a guy like Vasilevsky or a Connor Hellebuck or a Carey Price, then you got to go tandem. You got to have a strong tandem, right? Kemper is a bit of an outlier to me because Colorado was just so good last season that they literally just needed a guy to make the saves he was supposed to make, and he did. And then he won a Stanley Cup because of it. So, that yeah, it's interesting. But again, all these guys like Crawford, Quick, and Thomas, and I guess Holtby to an extent, like those were the number one guys. But and you're looking at how much they make now, and at the time, I think that was a pretty high salary for anyone. But like that's why I was surprised at a 5 million price tag for Samsonov. Like I don't know the offhand the goalie hierarchy in the NHL right now. I know Bobrovsky's at 10, Vasilevsky at 9.5, Carey Price I think is still on the books at 10. Like those are the guys, and then it kind of drops off. Like and people don't make that much money as a goalie. I think UC Saros might be making 4 or 6 or something like that. If he's making 6, I'm not paying a guy like Samsonov 5, right? But I like your projection. I like it because look at Vegas. Not pointing directly to Aiden Hill, but who else like Logan Thompson on a rookie deal. And again, it comes down to the system that you play them in, which is something the Sens need to focus on, obviously. But yeah, like I'm not going out and breaking the bank on Connor Hellebuck, let's say, and like breaking up the core that the Sens have built. Like that, I don't know. Like that to me is a little. I'd have a red flag for that. Just looking at like goaltending projections and all that. Like it's I like to say it's voodoo. You don't know what you're going to get out of a goalie every other night. And I'm confident in Anton Forsberg. I really am. Like I know the double knee surgery is turning people off, and quite frankly, it should. It's not a it's a bit of a freak injury that he's got to come back from. But by all accounts, he works hard and he'll be good. Like I think I don't know. I'm oddly confident that he'll be even better next season, which sounds kind of strange. Like I just have this sense that he's gonna like get the documentary going because Anton Forsberg's coming back with revenge next season. Is gonna be a great story. Like Linus Olmark, I think makes 5.5 million, right? Like I'm not paying Samsonov 5 if Olmark is making 5.5 or whatever it is. After the season he just had. Like yeah. So anyway, that's where I'm at with the goaltending. I think worry about the roster and then once you put a good roster in place, any goalie's going to look good. And like we said, this blue line for once is going to be elite. Like this blue line is not going to have holes in it when they're healthy, and they're going to drive play and be a strength for this team, which they haven't been in the past, which should help the goaltending. There's no Nikita Zaitsev. There's probably no Travis Hamonic out there for 20 minutes a night. Like this is a good scenario. So any goaltender that comes in is going to look good, which is why I don't think you need to spend $5, $6, $7 million on a goalie unless you're trading DeBrincat for a UC Saros in a deal. That's the only time it makes sense to me.
Yeah, well, I asked members of everydaysens.com. I asked them on the Instagram story last night. I said we're going to be talking about this, and I asked them kind of, do you think Ottawa needs to acquire like a star goaltender? And their response mainly was pretty much, if you get him in a deal for DeBrincat, then yes, because I think like if you got a UC Saros or a Carter Hart in a deal for DeBrincat, I'd be very happy with that. Hart pending the investigation, obviously, but like if you get that caliber of goalie in a deal for DeBrincat, I think that's a win. But if you go out and sign a free agent for like $7-8 million, that's a major risk. Like goalies, as you said, are voodoo. And that's why you kind of see some of these deals too, though, is Linus Ullmark was not good before he came to Boston. Like he was really not good in Buffalo. And then he comes to Boston and he's like this Vezina. I think, did he win the Vezina? Like he's this Vezina winning goaltender.
He will. He'll
Yeah.
I think the awards are next week or something.
Yeah,
Actually, maybe the day of the draft. I don't know. But
yeah.
he will win it, yeah.
But like they kind of break out of nowhere at this older age, so it's hard to tell. Like even Mads Sogard is still so young. I mean, I know he didn't have a great season. I kind of have the numbers pulled up somewhere here, but like he had an 889 save percentage and I think -5 GSAX. So he didn't have a good season, but at the same time, like he's so young. He was not even expected to play. I think he could easily come out next season and be 10 times better than he was just because that's how goalies work. They're just like, they can go from being bad to good in snap of the fingers. Like it's just kind of crazy. Um, I am with you with Forsberg. I really like Anton Forsberg. I think he wasn't overly consistent this past year, but at the same time, it was kind of a hard thing because he got stuck with the first bad stretch of games when Talbot was hurt, and I think he kind of broke his confidence a bit after that. But he looked better towards the end, I thought, Forsberg, and before his injuries. I still do think that they should look on the market for a goalie this summer, but not a star goalie. Like the only long term fit in free agency right now really is like Tristan Jarry, who would sign probably the projection is 4 times 5 million basically, which I just don't like. He hasn't been good enough in Pittsburgh to warrant signing that contract. Um, I have a few listed here. So what I was saying about Forsberg and the tandem that they build is I think that you need to have someone who can basically split with Forsberg, and they don't need to steal games. They need to be good enough is my kind of motto on it. So we talked about it a bit on one of our first episodes, but I love Semyon Varlamov. His projection is 2 times 2.75, which I would happily dish out for Varlamov. He's been really good behind Ilya Sorokin in New York. He's had like a 910 save percentage or higher in each of the last 4 seasons, and he's 35 years old, but he's still been really, really good and strong. So if you paired someone like him with Forsberg, I'd be very content entering next season with that. And yeah, the defense is a big thing, and people are kind of underrating that. I know some people, they even said when they looked at the lineup projections that I did, and they said, well, this is just the same team as last year. And I was like, no. It's like they've added Jacob Chikrin for one, who is like arguably a number one defenseman who played 12 games for them. Like that doesn't matter. That doesn't count for his impact on last season. He's going to be a huge contributor this year. They've also got Josh Norris returning. Like this is a different team regardless of what it looks like on paper. Anyways, back to the goalies. I've also got I know Aiden Hill just won the cup. He's probably going to get overpaid because of that, but his projection is 2 times 3.3 million. Antti Ranta is someone I really like. Not flashy. People don't think of him overly highly, but Ranta has been really good in Carolina. He's 34. I think his projection is 2 times 3 million a year. And he had a 19-3-3 record this year and a 15-5-4 record last year in Carolina. And Carolina's a good team, but he's been a big part of their success. And Ranta, 7 of his last 9 seasons have been over .910 save percentage. He's a good goalie and someone who could ideally split with Forsberg at a cheap price, right? And give you 2 or 3 more good years. And then obviously you've got Jonas Korpisalo, you've got Frederick Anderson. The list kind of goes on. There are options who I think Ottawa could sign for 2 years at maybe 2 to 3 million, and they can afford that, and they could split with Forsberg, and then Sogar could kind of take the year to develop in the AHL, and then you can go from there with him and Maryland, obviously, and Mandalise. You've got a lot of options here. So for me, I'd love to see Forsberg tandem with one of those guys I named at an affordable price next year, and I think that tandem would be good enough to make the playoffs and potentially compete in the playoffs. But it's going to come down to the defense. It's going to come down to staying healthy. It's going to come down to I don't know, to trading DeBrincat. There's going to be varying factors, but yeah, goaltending, I do think it should be upgraded, but I think that Sogard is still, to me, the long-term option in net. I don't think you need to acquire a proven star goalie unless it's Saros.
Yeah, it's tough because they did this last summer, and I didn't even think they needed to, and it bit them. They didn't need to upgrade their goaltending necessarily. I would have been okay rolling with Sogard and Gustafson, but they obviously saw something they didn't like in Gus, and he went and found tremendous success in Minnesota last season. So that's a bit of a tough one to swallow,
Do
especially with
not
how.
trade Sogard.
Yeah, exactly, right. Have be wary about that. But I wonder if the team is also wary about getting a older goalie. I don't know. I don't want to blame Talbot's age on his injuries, but it's not nothing. It has to be I know he said himself that it was the worst injury season of his career or something like that. So I don't know. And Forsberg too, you have to be aware of that. So it all comes down though to, are you ready for Mads Sogard to be a backup kind of guy, and can Forsberg take the load of starts? Because a tandem, yeah, it's in theory it work. It sounds great. You go 41-41, boom, it should work out like that, but it probably won't. They're going to be bumps and bruises. There's going to be back to backs where guys have to play, a lot. There's going to be breaks where who, the Sens fumbled the rotation last season. They absolutely did, because they They put Talbot in all of December when they were both healthy because he was hot. Well, then he got hurt again, and then it's like, what do we do now? And then they struggled in January. So then Forsberg comes in, he wins 4 in a row, he gets injured, and then Talbot comes back in, doesn't make a save for the rest of the season. Like that's a tandem looks great on paper to me until there's an injury to one of them, and then you have to ride one of them. So I'm confident still in Anton Forsberg if he's healthy to give him the bulk of starts. He was used to it when Matt Murray was here, and did very well actually behind a pretty piss poor team, piss poor defense core too. Um, it just the X factor, and I love talking about X factors with this team. Another one is Sogard. Is if they're confident that he's ready to be on the bench every game and be a guy who you can turn to in a back-to-back scenario, like not a guy you have to shelter necessarily, then I'd just do that. And that's going to be up to the team, right? Like we can have our preferences, but we don't know. We don't talk to Mad Sogard all the time. We don't know how his summer's going, all that. Like, but we've talked about it. Like, if he's ready, I don't want to sign a Varlamov who might push Forsberg out of a spot, and then like if Forsberg gets outplayed by Solgaard, then what are we doing? Like what now, essentially, right? Um, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, well, my only concern with running Forsberg Sogard is, and again, I know Forsberg, I'm hoping he stays healthy, but if one of them gets hurt, then you're back to kind of having like a Mandalise or somebody back in goal, which is not ideal because, again, they have to make the playoffs next year. So then you're in like this very shallow pool of goaltenders. Whereas if you at least have like a tandem, then Sogard can start in the AHL and then he can come up when somebody ultimately gets hurt, because I'm sure they will, because Ottawa somehow seems to have all these critical injuries every year now. But I don't know. I just like the idea of having depth at goaltender. Like, I think that's just because of how important it is for them to make the playoffs this year. And I know Sogard's had his injury troubles too. Like, he's been hurt a lot in the AHL as well. So if you have him and then, Forsberg gets hurt or something, it's you're very shallow very quickly. So I don't know. I would be confident in the idea of having Forsberg and Sogard. I'm fine with that. It makes me worried about the depth. Like, if one of them gets hurt, you're in a very nerve-wracking situation.
Yeah, for sure. But my I guess I'll counter that with, if one of them gets hurt, like, or both get hurt, like it like happened last season, like it happened with Forsberg and Talbot, then you're screwed because then you're in the same scenario anyway. But you've also allocated a lot of cap to that you could have spent on your roster. So I'm in favor of bringing in another guy. I don't know if I want to bring in a guy who makes more money than Forsberg. Sorry, and he's at 2.8, I think.
Yep.
This season and next. So
2.275, yeah.
yeah, so 2.75, and that's actually probably ballpark for another guy you'd be looking at. Like I'm not saying they should sign him, but like older goalies who are going to look for 1 year, like literally to serve as backups, I think would be good, because that's a player or a goalie when you're a good backup in the NHL, you have to be able to run for 5-6 games when your top guy goes down. Like that's a good backup. So I would, if I was the Sens, I would go at that angle a bit more than rather than attacking to get a 1A, 1B starter. Because when it comes to playoffs anyway, let's get ahead of ourselves here. If it comes to the playoffs, you're picking one guy. The Bruins absolutely fumbled it in the playoffs, and they started Swayman in game 7. Like they overthought it completely. Like, you have to stick to one guy in the playoffs anyway. So in the season, yeah, getting a guy who can carry a bunch of the load is good. But I don't know if the price is worth it necessarily. So like, yeah, there's like Jonathan Bernier's a guy, like I don't want him, but I'm listing goalies who are going to probably get 1 year
Well,
deal.
I have it sorted actually here. If you want
Okay,
to, yeah, I can
perfect.
read it off. Guys that are going to get 1 year deals at less than Forsberg's
Lauren
rate.
Brossoit, I just saw him.
Yeah, yeah.
He'd be a guy I'd be all over, I think.
Yeah, like I mean, there's a lot of goalies actually, but um, I don't know. I can't even list them all if there's too many now. But like Mackenzie Blackwood is a guy who, like, he could be depth and he's gonna get less than 2 million. Brossoit for sure is a good one. Bernier got like Aaron Dell. God help us if that happens because of his connection with Brady. But like Brian Elliott's there. I don't know. It's basically the Yaroslav Halak. Like, it's just old guys basically who are kind of on the brink of regression, who you're worried about, but at the same time, could they give you 1 good year of depth for like $1 million? I mean, it's not a bad risk, really.
That's what I mean, right? And that's why I think look, and you can people can debate all they want about if Forsberg is good enough to be the guy. I think he is, but it's hard until you haven't seen it, right? So I think what they should attack the goaltending with, like you mentioned, it should be a guy who is going to make maybe a bit more than what Sogard makes, but a player who you would be okay sending him or trading him away during the year because of Sogard's play. Like that's kind of where I would go. I think they need to sign some AHL goalies actually, just to shore that up a little bit, especially if Sogard's up here. Um, that's kind of the angle I think they should take because we've talked about it. Like Sogard at what 850 or something, whatever he's making in the NHL. Is that difference going to be like if you sign a Halak for 1.7, let's say he makes that, or Brossois I think was at 1.4 on the spreadsheet. Is Brossois going to provide 500,000-600,000 worth of value more than Sogard, or should you just not sign a guy like that? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, if you're going for depth and you're going for security at the position, I don't want to be spending a huge price tag on it, especially given how cap strapped this team is going to be if they trade DeBrincat or not. Like we just talked about, if you trade DeBrincat, then you have to shore up the forwards. That should be priority one. If it becomes priority one, good chance you end up paying more for the guys replacing DeBrincat than you would for DeBrincat himself, which sucks. So anyway, like it all ties into it's like it all ties into each other. I just after watching the Cam Talbot thing last season, they got a guy, he was an all-star the year before, and then he just struggled here. And I would be very cautious if I was the Sens about trying to do the same thing again.
The only thing I'll say with Cam Talbot, and this is why I think they should expand the analytics department, which they will do, is that he was an all-star. So the whole thing, and I was even excited because he was an all-star, and just the perspective of that is really good. And I mean, he came in with a 910 save percentage the year prior, and he had 910 or higher the last 3 years, and that sounds really good. But his underlying numbers were not so good. Like, I think he was bottom 5 among all goalies in GSAX, which is goals saved above expected, which is basically like the ratio of good saves to bad goals that you let in. He had negative 17.26 in Minnesota last year, and Minnesota's like got a really good defense. Like they're always known as this defensive team. So if he was struggling on that team, there were some red flags there that they kind of missed in a way, because I doubt they even like looked at those numbers at all before acquiring him. It was probably more of just a look at his general numbers, which is fine, but like he was in the negatives for GSAX in each of his last 5 years before coming to Ottawa, which is pretty, like, it is not good. I mean, even Forsberg had 5 GSAX this year, I think. Ironically, Talbot actually he was positive for the first time in 5 years, but my point is just that, like, there are underlying numbers where I think if you look at them, you can kind of see, like, for example, Varlamov's been very good in that respect, and on both the save percentage and like the quality of chances he's faced is another big thing. If you look at, you can go to natural stat trick, you can sort by put it under rates and sort by high danger high danger shots against per 60 minutes, and that just shows you which goalies are facing the most high danger shots against per 60 minutes. Like that's just kind of gives you an idea of the situation they've been in, and then you can kind of apply that to how it's going to impact them in Ottawa, where they are going to face a lot of high danger chances, right? You want to get a goalie who has a good high danger save percentage. You know that they can face those chances. Like, the point is just that there are ways to kind of, you have to look underneath just the basic numbers to evaluate certain players and goalies. And Talbot did have some red flags. But at the same time, yeah, he was an all-star. And I mean, I was hopeful that he would come in and be good enough. And injuries kind of derailed the whole thing. Again, like if Forsberg gets hurt next year, it's going to be pretty disappointing because I don't know what's going on with the injuries, but I seem to think that Ottawa's having a lot more than we should be in the last few years, and a lot more critical ones. So
Yeah, and we'll just wrap up with this one here because we're going long again. But with the goaltending and with that, it's like if there's a guy on that list who is looking for a new deal now, had good underlying numbers, and you can get him for like less than Forsberg, then I'm all over it. I just don't. I'm not buying again this tandem approach. Like I think you gotta kind of roll with your guy. Like you gotta pick a guy, and as a team too, it's nice to have that. Like as players, you kind of just start banking on the one guy being back there. You get comfortable with it. You know how to play in front of him, all that. Um, yeah, I'm it's hard because the Sens need to score more goals at 5-on-5 next season, and they also need more saves at 5-on-5 next season. There's like their 5-on-5 play wasn't bad. The results at both ends were just brutal. Like they couldn't get a save and they couldn't score a goal. It was just nightmare fuel. So that's again though, that's why like I think all of that should normalize itself, let's say, right? I know the New Jersey Devils, they were a good team the year before in 2022. Like young, had good offense, decent underlying numbers. They just could not make a save, and no goalie could stay healthy. They go out and get Vitek Vanacek, who isn't that good of a player. Or I mean, he wasn't a highly sought after goalie.
Just like an average
Um,
goalie.
he was, and admittedly, too, last summer there were way more goalies available, which is why I was also surprised the Sens went for Talbot if they were trying to, get a new guy. But anyway, like all of this, it's a gamble, and they'll get criticized either way if it doesn't go right. Like if they don't do anything, they'll be like, "Why'd you go do something?" If they do get a guy and then he ends up being a bust, that it'll be like, "Oh, why would you do that?" Whatever. Like it's a winless scenario unless it works, right? Which I guess is NHL hockey. So just if you have anything else just to add here with the free agent frenzy segment here for us, because we're approaching July 1st here. Like we're getting down to the big days for off season coverage.
Yeah, well, no, I think we've just hit an hour for the first time. I think that's the official hour mark there. I can see it in the top corner. It looks nice. No, I just think it's important. Like, I can't believe how close we are to the draft here. There's been, just because Ottawa doesn't have a pick till the fourth round, there's been like no real hype about the draft for the Sens at all. Like Twitter is hardly talking about the draft or anybody in the draft, which is just funny because the last few years it's been like, the from the very last game until now it would be all about the draft. That's all you want to talk about. And for this year, it's just not like nobody really cares that much for Ottawa's perspective, but. I don't know for like if DeBrincat's gonna get traded, it's gonna be soon. That's all I can really say because I know there's not like an official timeline, but Dorian, from what we've heard and from especially what Bruce Garriock has reported, who is probably getting his info right from the team and maybe even Pierre Dorian, it's like it's always been by the draft. So the next 9 days will be interesting. That's all we can say. Like we're gonna see what happens, and if DeBrincat is traded, we're gonna have to break down these free agent options a little bit more too, because I think it becomes a lot more realistic if he's not on the team, because now you've got this gaping hole on the second line. And if not, then that'll be exciting. So either way, yeah, I'm good. I think this was a good episode. We've really gone into detail here for a full hour.
Yeah, so episode 17 is the official episode where we hit an hour. So thank you for everyone who kind of stuck around with us. If you joined later or whatever, pleased to have you. Please like and subscribe to the YouTube account, and go subscribe to everydaysens.com for written content, bonus episodes, all that. We'll get one probably maybe going this week as well. So thank you, everyone, and we will see you on Friday.